No, can you pull my camera closer to me? Swivel it that, and the front part up further. Okay, that's good there. Yeah. Swivel a little bit more that way so we get, no, the other way. Yeah, we get less of that weirdness on the other side of our backdrop. Okay, so we are ready to launch. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Banachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya To Darasata Shri Śrimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantraj Śrimad Bhāgavatam Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so from what I understand, we are in Canto 3, Chapter 10, Text 20, Chapter 26, Text 10, right? 3, 26, 10. Say on the board. Okay. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Yatat Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam Sad Asad Atmakam Nityam Sadasad Atmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahur Avishesham Visheshravat Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Yatat Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam Sadasad Atmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahur Avishesham Visheshravat. Please chant. Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam sadasad atmakam pradhanam prakritim prahur abhiseshram visheshravat Shri Bhagavan Vacha Tat Kim Avyaktam Nityam Sadasadatmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahur Aviseshram Visheshravat Shri Bhagavan Vacha Yat Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam Sadasad Atmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahur Aviseshram Visheshravat Shri Bhagavan Vacha Yat Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam Sadasad Atmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahur Abhisesham Visheshravat Vaishnavis Shri Bhagavan Vacha Yat Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam Sadasad Atmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahur Abhiseshram Visheshravat Shri Bhagavan Vacha Yat Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam Sadasad Atmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahur Avisesham Visheshravat Shri Bhagavan Vacha The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Yat, now further, Tat, that, Trigunam, combination of the three modes, Avyaktam, unmanifested, Nityam, eternal, Sadasat, Sadasat Atmakam, consisting of cause and effect, Pradhanam, the Pradhan, Prakritim, Prakriti, Prahu, they call, Avisesham, undifferentiated, Visheshravat, possessing differentiation. So, the translation reads, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifested state and is called Pradhan. It is called Prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So we can read this responsively. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifested state and is called Pradhan. It is called Prakriti when in the manifested state of existence. So here is Prabhupada's purport. The Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage, which is called Pradhan, and he analyzes this Pradhan. The explanation of Pradhan and Prakriti is that Pradhan is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the manifestation is called Prakriti. Impersonalists say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that Pradhan is the Brahman stage, but actually the Brahman stage is not Pradhan. Pradhan is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the Mahatat is also different from the Pradhan because in the Mahatat there are manifestations. The actual explanation of Pradhan, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifest, avyakta, the reaction of the total elements does not take place. And that stage of material nature is called Pradhan. Pradhan is not the time element because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is it the jiva, or marginal potency of the living entity, or designated conditioned living entities. Because the designations of the living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature, immediately previous to its manifestation, is called Pradhan. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Yatat Trigunam Avyaktam Nityam Sadasad Atmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahur Avisesham Viseshavad. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifested state and is called Pradhan. It is called Prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. So I guess one metaphor or analogy we could use, since it's a part of our everyday world, is flat screen. If this flat screen was lit up with all white pixels, in other words, all the red, green, and blue were at max, for those digitally inclined, they were all at 255. Then we would see a white screen, absolutely nothing there. Or, of course, if they were all at 0, we'd see a black screen, nothing there. And this is like the Pradhan. All the individual pixels, in this case they are three-dimensional pixels, all of them are in one state. So therefore there's no differentiation. There's no color, there's no form, nothing's happening. But when Pradhan is agitated further, it becomes the Mahatat, or as we're hearing here, it's called Prakriti. And then forms begin to emerge. We get places where there are concentrations and places where there are no concentrations. Certain colors are prominent in some places and not prominent in other places. And this is the world that we see around us. So Devahuti is asked about material nature, and we find that things start off with Brahman, which is the effulgence of the Supreme Lord. It's the emanation of the thousands and thousands of living entities coming from the Supreme Lord. They're effulgent because they're tiny, bright sparks. But this is converted into what's known as Prakriti, because three modes of nature are added to it, which is what we learn in today's verse. So Brahman and Prakriti, Brahman and Pradhan are not the same thing. There's no three modes of nature, as Prabhupada puts it, in the Brahman, but there is in Pradhan. So when the Pradhan is like the television set that's all white or all black, then that's called Pradhan. When forms start to emerge from it, then we get shapes and colors. And then it's called the Mahatat or Prakriti. And therefore, the material nature around us is on all sides, and it's being controlled. And indeed, we all have a small lump of that material nature. And we refer to it and think of it as our body. So in the big collection of material nature which goes out seemingly ad infinitum to the stars, there's a small lump, and we call it our body. And we identify with it. And it is very important to kind of understand how the mechanism works, because then you are not taken in by it. Maybe we've seen these kinds of displays you sometimes see on YouTube where somebody is doing some magic trick, you know. A classic one is the girl getting cut in half, you know. So they bring out a big box and the girl, you know, goes inside the box, and then, the man gets a big saw and cuts the box in half. And you can see the girl's feet coming out one side of the box, and you can see her head coming out of the other side of the box. And she kind of wiggles around as he's cutting through. And then you think, oh my God, the poor girl's getting cut in half. But actually, she's not being cut in half. And this trick has been, described by many how it's done. There's two girls, actually. One of them is, scrunched up this way, and the other one's scrunched up the other way. And one of them has their legs out one side, and the other girl has her head out the top side. So they're not really cutting the girl in half. There's two girls. And once you learn the trick, you're no longer apprehensive when the magician starts to cut the box in half, because you know that it's a trick. And similarly, the material nature looks really, really, really solid. In fact, most people say that, you got to get right with reality. This is reality. Material, wood, mortar, and concrete. All these things are reality. And then we're hearing about all this stuff in Śrimad Bhāgavatam, about the Supreme Lord. Most of us don't have very deep contact with the Supreme Lord. We're hearing about the Pradhan, you can't go somewhere to a restaurant and they'll pour you a bowl of Pradhan. These things are, ethereal, ideational, they're conceptual, and we can think that this stuff is all, stuff floating around in our minds, but let's get down to the solid stuff outside, the material nature. But actually it's the other way around. The material nature is what's flaky. And what's very peculiar is the material nature is constantly changing, atom by atom, minute by minute, drop by drop. And it's changing so slowly that we don't perceive it, but we do perceive the effects over time. We've all had the experience that, we're friends with some family and they have some little kids, And, we say, oh, hi, da, 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 and little kids are there. And then we're gone for some time, a year or two later, and suddenly they're not little kids anymore. And we think, wow, when did that happen? And of course, the parents don't notice it because they're around the kids all the time. So kids are growing slightly, a little bit. And, if you're not in direct contact with them, when you see them and you don't see them for a year or a year and a half, and you suddenly see them again, suddenly, whoop, they have increased in size. And so everything in the material nature is changing. In fact, in our Greek philosophy, Heraclitus said, famous statement, that you never step in the same river twice, that there is nothing that isn't changing. So Heraclitus was positive, and he started a whole school of philosophy, that there's only change. There is no stability anywhere. Of course, if you accept that concept, then one thing has to be stable, and that is that there's only change. So at least that has to be stable. But Heraclitus was fully dedicated to change, and he talked about it all the time. That was his main theme, and he built a whole philosophy around it. In another part of the Greek world, there was Parmenides, who said there's only stability. All change is a figment of the imagination. So naturally, these two philosophers were at odds with one another. One said there's only change, and the other said there's only the one stable, never-changing whole. So which is it? I'm afraid that Heraclitus and Parmenides never sorted it out. But we know that there are some things that never change and some things that always change. We have the idea of, the sat and asat. So things that are stable forever are considered real, and things that change are considered less real or unreal. So sages are concerned with what's real. What's real? If we could look at this scene right now with some kind of X-ray vision, where what would be here 10,000 years from now? What will be here 10,000 years from now? Will this building still be here? Will New York City still be here? Probably not. Will we still be here? Not in this body, anyway. We won't be here in this body. We might still be here. So therefore, the soul has a feature that this building and all this stuff we usually call reality doesn't have. And that is that it will endure for thousands and thousands of years. The soul doesn't have to worry about getting moth holes in it. The soul doesn't have to worry about getting rusty or gradually flaking or all those other kinds of interesting things that material nature does that we have to constantly work on. Our Mukunda Ashraya is the expert of constantly battling against these forces of rust and decay and dust and gradual dwindling down. He changed the ballast in my light fixture yesterday so that now there is light and it comes on exactly when you turn the switch on, not a few seconds later or sometimes not at all. So we're battling against these things. And when we hear about how material nature works, we are less swindled by it. We don't think the girl is being cut in half. And we understand what's going on the scenes, and we're not so tempted to go for it, to take what's not going to be around in a serious way, knowing that eventually it won't be around. So we need to hear this. This tends to break our consciousness out of the mesmerizing hypnosis that our society puts us in. And of course, even material nature does that. It seems solid, it seems like it's going to be around, it seems like it's reassuring us that it will be with us until the cows come home. So this is something that we are learning, that the pradhan, which is unmanifested, becomes manifested with the modes of nature. The modes of nature then gradually sort themselves out into the 10 senses, the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, time, and the jiva soul. And when we understand these are the ingredients, like if you're going to bake a cake or you're going to cook a subject, you need to know what ingredients go into it. So these are the ingredients that go into it. When you see how the ingredients work, you can put it together and you can understand what's going on. And that's why it's important to know how material nature is working. And we see that in Bhagavad Gita and in Bhāgavatam, this theme is there. I was just thinking, where does Krishna say it in Bhagavad Gita? Of course, it's 13th chapter. There, Krishna is describing the Sankhya philosophy to Arjuna, nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. He's explaining Arjuna is asking a question because Sankhya is a part of the curriculum of spiritual life. If we were going to major in spiritual life in the school of genuine philosophy, then part of the curriculum would be Sankhya philosophy. We would learn about how these material elements come together. And one thing that I mentioned the other day that I would like to go to, which I think is a very interesting section of Bhagavatam, which you don't hear about very often. Do we have the possibility of pulling it up on the screen? This is the Song of the Avanti Brahman. It's 11th canto, chapter 23. And it's a story that has some quirks and twists in it that are very interesting. So, the story is, in a quick overview, that the Avanti Brahmana and the devotees are saying that Avanti is the modern area in India known as Malwa, wherever that is. I don't know. Maybe some of you or Indian devotees know where Malwa is. But at any rate, he was an agriculturalist and probably a food broker of some kind or another, very wealthy. And at the same time, he was a miser. Even though he had lots of wealth, he was well-to-do by all standards. He was one of those people that just enjoys the mental satisfaction of knowing that there are big numbers associated with his bank account. It says that he didn't even spend the money on himself, on food or on clothes or anything. He didn't spend the money by donating to the demigods or the deities. He didn't spend the money on his family. He didn't spend money on anything. And in fact, he didn't even pay his taxes. It's interesting that here we have, Bhagavatam 5,000 years ago, and he was a tax evader. So the Avanti Brahmana came to be nicely hated by everyone. His family was very disturbed by him. They, wondered why he wouldn't spend anything on them. The pundits and ever would know that he would never go to a temple and donate anything to the demigods. The agents of the government were investigating him to see whether he was paying his taxes or not, and they were soon to come to the conclusion that he wasn't. And his friends and other relatives, they came to treat him neglectfully because he never gave any money to them, and they knew that he had money. So he came to be kind of despised by everyone. And then, because he never gave in charity, he never gave anything to the Supreme Lord or the demigods or to his family members or anything, he had a reversal, and his wealth dwindled and he lost everything. The government came, and it says in the Bhāgavatam, reclaimed some of the wealth that they had been owed for taxes. His family stole some of the wealth and disappeared. And his crops failed, and in general he just had a complete reversal of his fortune, to the point where he was essentially bankrupt. He lost everything. And he became, since his whole life was this money, he became very, very sad and despairing. But he meditated on it, and suddenly, this is where the story takes a strange turn, suddenly he had a realization. And he said, actually, the Supreme Lord must have been pleased with me. He took away this wealth, which was actually the source of my misery. I thought it was the source of my happiness, but it was really the source of my misery. I was accumulating this wealth for no good purpose, neither for sense gratification nor for spiritual life. I didn't use it in any circumstance. And so when a person like me has this kind of wealth and doesn't use it, the wealth does them no good while they're alive, but earns them a place in hell afterwards. And he made a very interesting realization where he talked about, let me see if I can get there, it's 11:23, what is it? 18 and 19, where he mentions 15 things which are associated with wealth, especially when it's not being used for the service of the Supreme. These are 15 things, and we see them. This is real life, as real life as it gets, and everybody can relate to this, whether you're a Hare Krishna devotee or not. These 15 things are associated with wealth: theft, violence, speaking lies, duplicity, lust, anger, perplexity, pride, quarreling, enmity, faithlessness, envy, dangers caused by women, gambling, and intoxication. So if someone has wealth and they're not using it for spiritual life, these 15 things will be natural. They will surround like a cloud of some kind of noxious or toxic fog, that wealth. It'll be there. And in this way, a person will not really be able to enjoy that wealth, even if they are interested in using it, unlike this miser Brahman was. So he realized that he had been liberated from these things, from theft, violence, speaking lies. These kind of things are common wherever there is wealth. So he says, even a man's brother's wife, parent, and friends united with him in love will immediately break off their affection and relationship and become enemies even over a single coin. So we see how concerns over the right partition of funds can really drive things, to extremes. So we're seeing this is one aspect of how a person becomes entangled in material life. Now, to again kind of fast forward on the story, this Brahmana, when he came to this realization, decided, I will give up this life that I have been leading. I will take only the bare necessities of life, and I will travel like a sannyasi from place to place. And I will depend on whatever comes to my possession. So that's what he did. And eventually his clothing became ragged. And it says that although he had decided to become renounced from his previous world and his previous situation, of course he didn't have to be renounced from his money, that happened already. He was followed by his previous reputation. So the people didn't forget. They thought, oh, just look at this man. You know, he lost everything. Now he's pretending to be a sannyasi. So it says that very crude and uncouth people would, when he was bathing, steal his clothes and pretend to give them back to him, but then not, and cause him to run around. That they would find him when he was getting some donation, some bhikshu that was given to him to eat, and if as he was trying to eat it, they would pass urine in his bowl. That sometimes people would get close to him and spit on his head. And he was being subjected to all this abuse. And, you know, he wasn't harming anybody. He was just trying to live a life of asceticism. Sometimes they would chain him up like an animal. And they would say crude and harsh words. And, you know, in the beginning of the story, it says that sometimes the harsh words of inimical people are more painful than actual arrows that people shoot in warfare. That the crude and cutting words are like this. But the Brahmana, he thought about it, and he had another realization, you know, that is brought out by this whole parable. And that is that actually these people are not actually the source of my misery. So the Brahmin from Avantipur, he sang this song that, well, what is the source of my misery? He said, is it other people? He said, no. Is it the planets? He said, no. Is it karma? He said, no. He said, is it my body? He said, no. So what is it? So this is where the story gets really interesting. And let's see where he explains it here. 42:11. The Brahmana said, these people are not the cause of my happiness and distress. Neither are the demigods, my own body, the planets, my past work, or time. Rather, it is the mind alone that causes happiness and distress and perpetuates the rotation of material life. So this is interesting. Maybe we can ask our group here, why do we say that other people are not the cause of our happiness and distress? What could be a philosophical rationale for making that? Yes, can we get the microphone for the folks and viewers at home? Uh-oh. Yeah, I noticed the other day that one microphone has the whole pop screen. The top of it is all worn off. I guess somebody got real hungry when they were waiting for prasadam and ate it or something.
So after that whole thing, I just want to reassure, you were asking what how is
If
it
we
that
were
we
going
see
to
those
explain
people aren't our problem? Yeah. Well, in a philosophical perspective, you could say that it's because of your vision of the situation. Like sometimes we see a situation in itself as the problem, but it's actually our vision of the situation that's the issue.
Right.
So it's like, instead of thinking, why are they, like playing the victim card, it's actually, you can think, how is Krishna trying to benefit me in this situation?
Yeah, that's interesting. Recently, I was studying about the Stoics, another Greek group, and this was their main preaching point. Maybe you've heard of some of these people like Marcus Aurelius, who was probably one of the best Roman emperors that there was. He was a Stoic. And during his life, Marcus Aurelius kept a diary, which he instructed that when he would die, that would be burned. He kept it only for himself. He was keeping the diary to remind himself of things he didn't want to forget. And of course, it was all these things. And if you read it or you hear parts of it, it sounds a lot like your kind of ISKCON Sunday feast lecture. It's got a lot of the same thing. Of course, he didn't talk about Krishna, but it was all about knowing that you're dealing with people who are liars and cheaters, but you can't be angry at them and things like that. It's really interesting. But this was what the Stoics thought, that it's not what the situation is, it's how we perceive the situation. So as Narada Muni was saying, that we have a situation that we are surrounded by. And we generally think that people are causing us misery. But actually, in one sense, we are only cause misery because we identify and judge the situation in a particular way. If we change our attitude, it also goes away. Of course, there are limitations to this, but basically that's the overall thrust. So we can say that other people are not really the cause. Now, what we're really talking about here is the ultimate cause of happiness and distress. So they are certainly part of the chain of things that causes happiness, distress. We know that we have adibhotic, adidaivic, and atmic miseries, and adibhotic miseries are miseries caused by other people. So that's there in the scriptures. But those miseries caused by other people are actually the way that our own karma is boomeranging back to us. Or if we're devotees, it's not our karma boomeranging back to us. It's Krishna's way of purifying us. So it's a little different. Now, how can we say that the demigods aren't the source of one's happiness or distress? Yes, Narada Muni's got it. He's still got the microphone back there.
How can we say the demigods aren't the source of our happiness and distress?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You could say also our lack of vision, but also on the same side, they're just doing their duty. So who are they actually working for? That's another thing we could consider.
Well, we know from understanding how karma works that the demigods are the people who, they're the adidaivic part of the adibhotic, adiatmic, adidaivic misery trilogy. And they arrange material nature to act in such a way that it gives us various problems, material problems. So that's there. So I want to move up to where he's describing this a little bit more. He's saying, the powerful mind actuates, this is, by the way, 43, 11, 23, 43. The powerful mind actuates the functions of the material modes, from which evolve the different kinds of material activities in the modes of goodness, ignorance, and passion. From the activities of each of these modes develop corresponding statuses of life. So this is why the Avanti Brahmana puts the blame squarely on the mind. That because of our false desires and the karma that we are getting as a result of the reaction to those false desires, we are experiencing happiness and distress, mostly distress. So this is the way that it works, that we imagine ourselves to be someone we're not, and we do things that we think will make us happy that won't, that cause reactions that we don't notice, and those reactions come back and cause us suffering, which we think is coming out of the blue. It's coming out of nowhere. It has nothing to do with us, and we feel falsely attacked, falsely accused. Although present along with the struggling mind within the material body, the supersoul is not endeavoring, because he is already endowed with transcendental enlightenment. Acting as my friend, he simply witnesses from his transcendental position. I, the infinitesimal spirit soul, on the other hand, have embraced this mind, which is a mirror reflecting the image of the material world. Thus I have become engaged with enjoying objects of desire and am entangled due to contact with the modes of nature. So Kapila Dev is explaining this to Devahuti. We're learning that there's all this machinery going on behind the scenes. We have the material nature, we have the demigods, we have karma, we have our body, we have, as we discover, that there are 5 things which we learn in chapter 3, Indriyani Parani Ahur, that there is the senses, but higher, there's material nature, but higher than the material nature is the senses, higher than the senses is the mind, higher than the mind is the intelligence, higher than the intelligence is the soul. So if the soul rightly uses the intelligence to wash it in Scripture, to get it to remember Scripture, then the soul will act as the proper GPS for the chariot of the body. So that's the GPS. The intelligence knows that I should go here, I shouldn't go there. And therefore, the intelligence will take the reins, which are the mind, and pull the horses, which are the senses, in an appropriate direction. And this is what is wanted. The intelligence being fixed in Shastra and scriptural understanding, attempting to act in harmony with those instructions, pulling the reins of the mind on the horses of the senses in appropriate directions. Because if you let the senses go whichever way they want, they will certainly go in some unwanted direction, which will cause us ruination. So this is Sankhya philosophy. We are learning how internally it's all set up. We're learning what we have to do. And later on, in this, 11:23 of Śrimad Bhāgavatam, the Avanti Brahmana says that if one controls the mind, then what need is there for austerities or penances of various kinds? And if one fails to control the mind, what good is it? Because the mind will mislead one. And so therefore, This is why, in general, the scriptures and Vedic knowledge tell us that ignorance is the source of misery. So when the mind doesn't know what to focus on or what to avoid, then misery is bound to happen. It will get more and more a part of our life. So therefore, we have to learn through this explanation of Sankhya how the machinery works. And once we learn how it works, we may be skeptical at first. But if we watch our world and we watch the people in our world around us, we begin to see that this ain't no fairy tale. You can just understand what's happening to people by understanding this machinery and watching it work. And then you see that it works on you too. And so therefore, this Brahmin from Avantipur began to travel through the world, not paying heed to those who were tormenting him even, knowing that he was singing the song, and that's the song that we mentioned the other day that the Avanti Brahmana said, Etam saastaya paratmanistam adyasitam purvatamar maharshibi aham tarisyam Etam saastaya paratmanistam adyasitam purvatamar maharshibi adyasitam purvatamar maharshibi. What's the next one? Yeah, aham tarisyam param. Let me go there. I don't know, when I do Gayatri, I always remember this, but whenever I try to quote it in class, it never works. It shows that I must have some issue with this. 57. Aham tarisyami durantaparam tamo kundangri nishevyaiva. Right, so. Etam saastaya paratmanistam adyasitam purvatamar maharshibi aham tarisyami durantaparam tamo mukundangri nishevyaiva. I will cross over the insurmountable ocean of nescience by being firmly fixed in the service of the lotus feet of Krishna. This was approved by previous acharyas who were fixed in firm devotion to the Lord Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the whole verse there. And when Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, he left. He was going to Vrindavan, at least so he thought. Of course, he was misled, but he was going to Vrindavan. He was constantly chanting this verse. So he thought this was this determination that one will cross over material nescience by being and trying to keep oneself in the service of Krishna. That's all it takes. All right. So any questions or comments? We're a little bit over, but if there's is the microphone is there's a.
Thank you for all the nice points that you made in the class. There's a nice verse that we encountered in the previous chapter that sort of along the lines of this one you just quoted about the solution to the miseries of being controlling the mind. It goes, Madashraya kata mrista, those who take shelter of my delightful narrations.
Those who take shelter of what?
My delightful narrations. Shrinvanti katayanti cha, by the process of hearing and chanting. Naitad, naitan, that's the last one. Tripyanti dvivida, tapanti vivida tapa. They aren't affected by the miseries of material existence. Naitan madgata chetasa, because their consciousness is fixed on me. So that's sort of elaborates how the person gets his mind completely absorbed in Mukunda, as that verse is saying, by the process of hearing and chanting these wonderful narrations. Yeah.
Yeah. So the mind is what gives us our false desires that we act on and therefore create bad karma. And the mind is also that instrument through which we identify with the body, which we're not. And we suffer that bad karma. So it works both ways. It creates our bad karma because we identify with things we shouldn't be, and we desire things that we shouldn't desire. And then we get bad karma as a result of them. And then we identify with the body, which we're not, and suffer the resultant karma. So when a person becomes detached from the mind and understands this principle through realization as a result of spiritual purity, then one neither does things which will greatly cause more bad karma to come their way, nor will they identify with the body, which is what is the source of their suffering. And this is why the Brahmin from Avantipur said that it's the mind that's actually the cause. Not the demigods, not planets, not other people, not time, not the soul, it's the mind. So there's a verse that Prabhupada quoted that I can't find, where he says, what use is austerity if one does not control the mind? And what use is anything if one doesn't control the mind? Because controlling mind is the ultimate issue. And by engaging in devotional service, we break the connection with the false ego. The false ego is what makes us think we're the body and causes us to identify with the sufferings of the body. And so with purity, we become disabused of our connection with the body, which is the break with the false ego. All right, so thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Śrimad Bhāgavatam. All glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.